excited to welcome Mallory Blair to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I know I've read your bio and I've been following a little bit of your work. You have one really fun job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So maybe you could share with the audience, what is it that you get to do every single day?
So every single day is different because I work in PR and I have so many different types of clients, whether they're technology or fashion or lifestyle, or an amalgamation of the three most often. But what we really do at Small Girls PR is try to make brands appear to be a little bit more in touch and a little bit more personable with their consumers. So we don't use wires, we don't use press releases, we do all one-to-one communication, as well as influencer events and collaborations.
Which is perfect because in many ways you're very relevant. It's like millennials are interested in what you just described. So is that kind of the foundation of your company?
It's interesting because like I'm a millennial, right? I'm 26, my partner is just turned 31. So we are millennials, so it's hard to stray from that. That's where our thinking and our mindset comes from. Obviously, as publicists, we can perform as many different things. But at the end of the day, like I'm waking up and I'm still 26. So with all of our brands that we work with, obviously it's really easy for us to play to those markets. We are digital natives in and of those communities. So I think a lot of brands have come to us for that. I know we work with huge brands like Panasonic and GE, and a big part of our work is connecting them with hyper-specific audiences such as millennials or influencers or thought leaders in some type of market they're interested in, which we have an affinity point.
Perfect. You know, I know that this is an interesting sector in that a lot of millennials love what you do. We've found that they don't really like traditional industries, but marketing, PR, these are things that get them very excited and they feel natural affinity for because they grew up with, or you grew up with technology and social media in your back pocket, right? So for you, when you represent your clients, what do you hope to help them to achieve? Because a lot of your clients are like you maybe a few years ago, and they know what they know, but how do you get them to take themselves to the next level?
It's interesting because no two clients are the same, so it's really hard to full court answer that question. Also, we do work with startups like what you're referencing, people who are maybe like us, but a few years ago just launching. But then we also work with huge Fortune 5 brands. Right. So obviously those two needs are really different, and it's really just about listening, I think. Listening to the client and what they want and trying to make them with the right reporter or the right blogger or the right fellow founder to do some cross-promotional kooky campaign.
Right. So Mallory, you are like a very, we joke, I mean, you are a very mature 26 and you're in a situation where, you know, you're being asked to speak for Forbes, and you are in many ways what we would call a very successful millennial. So someone looking at you and thinking, well, I want to be her, maybe you could give your younger self some advice that you have now.
Yeah. I think when I was in college, I worked 4 jobs. I really had a fire under my butt, both to have savings. So when I graduated and I took perhaps even an entry-level job, of course I ended up starting my own company, I would have at least some cushion, or if I wanted to travel and I couldn't get a work visa, I would have a cushion. So I was obsessed with saving very early on, and I think that set me up for success. I would recommend that, you know, work as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Try and find paid internships or internships obviously that give you college credit, so you're being efficient with your time. And I guess I would recommend just like doing favors for friends. Like if you have friends that have interesting startup ideas, or even you have a best friend who lives in the dorm room next door and wants to start a jewelry company, figure out how you can help them, whether it's calling manufacturers or whether it's calling the media, whatever your competency might be.
So did you work at a larger PR agency before starting your own firm?
No, I never even interned in PR.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I started a PR agency, like graduated college, okay, starting a PR company, never worked in PR. Fortunately, the inspiration also in starting the company was I met my business partner, Bianca, And she had been working not in PR so much, but in experiential advertising. So she would do value ads for advertisers that would buy media with Lucky Magazine. And she would say, okay, what's something really super cool we can do for this advertiser that makes them feel like they couldn't have gone to anyone for this, like they had to come to Lucky for this? And then once social media started getting its groove on, she started tapping those networks as well. And even as far back as like before Foursquare, it was called Dodgeball, like their first iteration. Like that's how far back we're talking. It turned out that one of the blogs that she started for a brand ended up being in the top 5% followed Tumblrs at the time. And I saw that and I was like, quit your job, we should take whatever you're doing and multiply it across many different brands. So that was really the inspiration, was just knowing someone who was really on the ground also with social media in the same way that I was as it was emerging. It was like the right place, the right time, the right people, and a fire under our butts.
That's incredible. So how long have you been, how long has Small Girl PR been in existence?
Yeah, it's been 5 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yep.
Wow, it's great because you get to work for yourself. And you don't have to, rely on anybody but yourself, and you're working really hard. And you're a perfect example of why not all millennials are just take. You are one powerhouse.
It's interesting because I think the idea of like entitlement comes up a lot, right? Where they're like, oh, millennials are so entitled and they expect to graduate and have everything handed to them. And I feel like we are the most polarizing of all the demographics, where there are so many millennials that have just started their own company, whether they raise rounds of funding or bootstrapped, or they're like, hey, and this has happened where we have people who are just graduated college and we ask them their salary requirement and they're like, low six figures. Like they think that out the gate with no working experience that like this is something that would be normal. So yeah, I've seen both.
So everyone is their own person, so it just depends. So let me ask you this, were your parents entrepreneurs as well?
So my mom works in real estate, so she works for herself. She doesn't necessarily run her own business, but she makes her own schedule and she has her clients and she juggles them all and keeps them happy. And then my dad does have an optometry practice. So he runs his own very small optical in Connecticut.
So I am sure a lot of that helps to see all that hard work. I am also a daughter of a real estate agent. And I gotta say, I feel that that was some of the best training for entrepreneurship, because you saw your parents working, or like it's my parents, I'm sure your mom as well, all hours of the day, anything to keep the client happy, right? And it didn't matter. There was no such thing as a 9-to-5 job.
Oh, totally. And like weekends.
Yeah, weekends. Like driving all over open house, and you just did whatever you did at any moment, and as long as the client was happy, you were happy.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
So let me ask you this. Now you have clients of all walks of life. If you were working with a new client and they came to you, what would some of the things that you would say, let's just say, for example, a client comes to you and says, I would love for you to represent me. What are 3 tips that you would give to your potential client?
3 tips to working with me. So like vetting a PR agency, or?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Okay, how about this? How about this? What do you think makes Small Girls PR different from the typical Edelman and all these other agencies?
It's so hard to say because I've never worked at any other agency, so really going into this blind. But what I've heard from our clients is I would say that what makes Small Girls different is that our relationships that are so ingrained in new media communities, because my partner and I are, again, digital natives and are in and of these communities, and we're so early on to so many platforms because we were that right demographic that was being targeted to, and we were so early out the gate. So that's one thing, it's just like this innate new media know-how. And 2, which is like the other side of that same coin, is the relationships in those communities, because Bianca and I were bloggers ourselves, so we know how to talk to bloggers and broker deals with bloggers, because we're also often tapped by more traditional agencies as blogger influencers ourselves.
Interesting.
So we play both sides. So like we've been in Ted Baker campaigns for other PR agencies where we don't rep Ted Baker, but we are being photographed and asked to Instagram for them. And then conversely, we're also doing that for Ann Taylor or other brands. So with other bloggers, not ourselves. So yeah, that's another thing. And then the third is, I would say, we don't use wires, we don't use releases, so we're not paying to put a certain amount of words up on a wire. Instead, we're actually reaching out. Every single reporter gets an individualized pitch based on their beat and based on the stories they've written and based on our working relationship with them. So it's really about matchmaking and being on the ground every day talking to reporters and not necessarily blindly, of course not mass BCCing.
So I guess that would be a question, because a lot of young people will say, well, I wouldn't even know where to start. And like, being 20-some years old, I might go to a reporter who's very seasoned, maybe an editor very seasoned, and they would think, well, you're so young. Mm-hmm. Has age been an issue for you?
There are so many reporters who are so young now, and you think about BuzzFeed and Vice and how those machines are really driven by so many young voices. I feel like it's an easy entryway point to connect.
It's an advantage.
Yeah, sometimes. I think also it's just like an advantage of having a unique perspective of the target that so many brands are trying to market to right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this was very educational and very interesting.
Thanks.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.